basically going to continue on the errors in variables modeling, which we were discussing in the last linear regression module. So basically, what we are looking at, what we looked at in the last class, the earlier module was that we wanted to build this cause and effect relationships in an errors in variables modeling framework, where to begin with, we assumed that the variables in the X block are clean, uncorrupted, and the variables in the Y block are basically corrupted with noise. And what we saw in the last class as a quick recap, and please let me know if I need to elaborate or expand on my recap, is that we saw how we can estimate the parameters, assuming all the x's are independent. We can estimate if we have m samples, n variables with number of samples, which we said statistically to be at least 10 times the number of parameters that you want to estimate. So in this case, the number of variables. And so M cross N matrix, if all of the x's are independent, noise-free, Y is affected with noise, then the estimates that you get for the parameter vector theta is essentially corrupted with various kinds of noise. And what we would like to do is basically analyze that noise. So we did analyze it using density functions. And we said that the estimate, the true value lies in plus minus some confidence interval, depending on whether you want 95 or 99%. We also said that there is a variance associated with these parameter estimates. And that variance is critically dependent on X transpose X inverse, which is basically a measure of how good your data quality is, which is further a measure of how well you have designed your experiments. If you have designed your experiments well, then X transpose X inverse is basically X transpose X is a small matrix, and so X transpose X inverse will be, I'm sorry, the other way around, X transpose X will be a large matrix, and so X transpose X inverse will be a small matrix. And the smallness of this matrix essentially measures the variance of your parameter estimates theta. And so smaller this matrix, the better it is in terms of your variance in your parameter estimates. So this is what we discussed in the last class, and I just had begun to introduce to you what happens when X is also noisy, and then we kind of ran out of time. So I'll just continue on that. Please let me know if I need to recap on anything else. Any of you? And I'll just pause here. Anybody would like to want me to recap? Maybe I should. Maybe the fitness of things, what I will also do is I will pull out very quickly the other slides so that, you people are able to do a quick recap. Sorry. And this one, yeah, here. So if you recall, if you remember what we did, we first derived an expression in the last class for, now we say that beta is X transpose X inverse X transpose Y. We took a closer look at beta transpose, showed that it's related to the noise variances, and so sigma square times this. And so beta transpose can be written as sigma square C, where C is X transpose X inverse. And then we said that further analyzing the diagonal, we essentially get the variance of each of the parameters as the size of the diagonal element. And we established these kind of confidence bounds. And then we also looked at R square in the last class, last module. We also looked at R square and R square adjusted to determine whether we have the right number of variables, right number of parameters that we would like to estimate. So this is the t distribution, and also the SSR versus SST and its relation to SSE. And we said R square, and we said, how bad comparison it is if we really have to compare MS SSR with SST and so on. So we said, let's look at R square adjusted. R square adjusted as a function of the number of parameters. And so a rough rule of thumb is that if R square minus R square adjusted is less than 0.2, you accept the model. Otherwise, you keep adding or increasing the complexity of the model. But again, this is as I said, an unfair comparison. So you probably want to look at a better way to compare a normalized MSE versus MSR. And then this can help you, if you look at the appropriate chi-square distribution, it will help you to look at the bigness of F and determine whether your model will be statistically not big. If you want F observed, if your model should be adequate, then F observed will be big enough, and then you can use it for your model building purposes. Okay, and we established this relationship between. So these slides I'll essentially put, but the rough rule of thumb is R square minus R adjusted square must be less than 0.2 for the model to be acceptable. And then we went into errors in variables modeling, where we said, okay, now what happens if X is also noisy? Okay, and that's what we will analyze. What I'll do is I will switch my slide deck, though I'll share both the slides. I'll just shift my slide deck to another slide where I'm going to talk about the same thing, but from a different slide deck. So errors in variables modeling, again, the same problem of estimating the alphas. So if you write this in terms of M observations, N variables, we have a tall matrix. And so far we assumed in the classical least squares that observations in X is error free, as you can see in the third bullet point. But this is certainly not a realistic assumption. We want to look at an errors in variables based approach to recognize that errors can be associated both
Excuse me, sir.
with X and with Y.
So your slide is not visible. I think you have not.
It is not visible. Okay, let me just see why. Oh, okay. For some reason, screen sharing was stopped. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so as the third bullet point says, classical least squares assumes the observations X to be error-free, which is not realistic. So we want to look at an errors in variables-based approach to be able to deal with this problem. Okay, so I'll just skip this in the interest of time, but I'll just look at what is the formulation that one does if one has to accommodate both errors in both X as well as Y. So then it becomes something called as a total least squares problem, where our problem is that we have Xij's, which are our measurements. We have Yi, which are our responses. Now, what we plan to do in this approach is basically we would like to estimate the clean X, which is what we call as X hat. We would like to estimate the clean Y's also, which is what we call as the Y hat. And we would like to estimate theta, which is the relationship between Y and X. And this is really the total least squares problem as written theoretically. Okay, what this says is the error between the estimate, which is assumed to be the true value, and Xij, which is the measured value. You want to essentially minimize these errors and estimate the parameters theta and X. Okay? And so what is the standard approach to solve this problem is now we look at the problem that we saw earlier as treating Y and X separately. Now what we want to do is we want to combine Y and X, assuming that they are linearly related. We combine them, meaning that we create a new matrix Z, which is Y and X. Okay? I think we are about 15 minutes into the session, and so Om Prakash, if you can kindly record the attendance.
Yes, sir.
The eigenvectors of what we do is we essentially create a new matrix Z. Now, Y is related to X using the linear relationship, And so the eigenvectors of Z transpose Z that correspond to the zero eigenvalues represent the linear relations of the columns of Z. What are the columns of Z? Y and X. What is the linear relationship between them? Y is equal to X theta. And so, if I look at the eigenvectors corresponding to the zero eigenvalue, which is the smallest eigenvalue, then those eigenvectors can give me my solution vector, the theta vector directly. How we will see in a short while. Okay. So this is if Z is semi-positive definite, okay, meaning that one of its eigenvalues is 0. If on the other hand, it's a positive definite matrix, which means none of the eigenvalues are 0, then we look at the eigenvector corresponding to the smallest eigenvalue because there is noise associated with Z, right? So when we do, and if you recall Professor Manibhushan's principal components analysis, when you are doing an eigenvalue eigenvector decomposition of Z, it is pretty much like, you are actually looking at Z transpose Z or the singular values of Z, which is pretty much PCA, right? So what we are trying to do here is if there is noise associated with Y and X, then that will obfuscate the linear relationship between Y and X. The eigenvalue will not be 0, but it will essentially be a small value which corresponds to the variance of the noise. And therefore, you look at the smallest eigenvalue and then look at the eigenvector corresponding to that to derive the vector. Okay. So now let's assume a few things here and then start relaxing the assumption. First assumption is, let's assume that the error variances are the same in all of the variables, right? Errors are independently and identically distributed. Let's assume that the error variances are the same. Okay. Let's assume that the causal block is full rank, meaning that it does not have any collinearity. None of the columns of X are dependent on each other, so it's full rank. Okay. Because if X is collinear, then identifying the smallest eigenvalue is not so straightforward. We'll come to that in a minute. Okay. But let me not put too many statements here. Let me directly first go to an example, and then I'll come back to the earlier slides. Okay. Let's take a simple example where I have the actual X consisting of 3 columns, as you can see here. Okay. And now if you see, the second and the third column are exactly identical. The first column is independent. Second and third are exactly identical. Now, let's see what happens when we do eigenvalue, eigenvector decomposition of this matrix under 2 situations. One situation is when I look at only the clean X, there is no noise added. And in the second case, I actually assume a noise and I add it to these true values. In practice, I don't know these true values, but no, let's assume that I know the true values and I'm adding this noise. So this is a simulation that I'm doing. So when I add Ex to X, okay, this is the noise that I add. Let me make an assumption that the noise of the variance, the variance of the noise of variance 0.25 is added to the correlated matrix. So the variance of this noise is 0.25. Okay. So when I add this, I essentially get a noisy X. Okay. Do you understand now what I'm doing here? I'm taking these true variables, I'm adding noise, getting this noisy X. Okay. And I'm subjecting this to an eigenvalue, eigenvector decomposition. Okay. What does that mean? I'm looking at X transpose X, or I'm doing a singular value of X. In other words, I'm doing a PCA. When I do a PCA of this X, it turns out that the eigenvalues are 16.25, 8.25, and lo and behold, this 0.25 is also coming here. Okay, this 0.25 is also coming in. What is this 0.25? I'm just going back here. 0.25 turns out to be the noise variance that I've added. Okay, very interesting, right? So what happens here is now, when I do PCA, the smallest eigenvalue actually happens to be noise. Okay. Now let me step back again. Going back here, if I had done a PCA of this original matrix, which does not have noise and it has 2 collinear, the collinearities in terms of 2 identical columns, the PCA of this true x would have given me a smallest eigenvalue of 0. But if noise added to this of 0.25, that noise shows up as the smallest eigenvalue equal to 0.25. Okay. So PCA now, when I'm looking only at the first k component sort of n, as Professor Mani must have taught you, when you do PCA, you are in some sense doing denoising. You are removing the noise. Okay. Now, if I take only the first two components, because if you look at this here, 18.25 and 8.25 are basically the first two components. If I look at reconstructing the x from the first two components, you see that I get nearly identical. I get nearly identical in terms of the first two, but not the third. Okay. So what you can assume here is that, sorry, yeah, so not the third, the reconstructed x does remove certain noise from the original variables, but it still does not generate for you the true matrix. What is the true matrix going back? The true matrix is this. Sorry, going back, the true matrix is this. It's not generating the true matrix, but in some sense it is doing some denoising, and it is generating for you the filtered value of x. Okay, so PCA in some sense does give you some filtering aspects. Okay, now let's see what happens if I have differing noise variances. Here, x3 is assumed to have twice the noise variance of x1 and x2. Now, PCA reveals that the eigenvalues are now different, 16.63, 8.25, and 0.62. Now, I'm not able to get 0.25 because the noise variances of each of these three variables are different. It will still, if I reconstruct PCA, it will still give me some reconstruction. But you see, what is the inference is that PCA removes noise only from the correlated variables. What are the correlated variables? If you go back here, the correlated variables are x2 and x3. x2 and x3. So PCA removes noise only from the correlated variables. The noise associated with the independent variables is retained in the reconstruction, as you can see here. Okay, the first column of the noisy and the reconstructed are almost nearly identical. Okay, so PCA removes noise on the correlated variables, not with the independent variables. This is something that we will take forward. So here is a simple example to just show you that this tool of eigenvalue eigenvector decomposition or singular value decomposition is actually a very, very powerful tool in our linear regression that we do. Okay? And how we will just understand. But now I'm just going back here. I'm just going back. The causal block X is assumed to be frank. And the total least square space estimation of the linear is not reliable in the presence of collinearities, which is something that we need to address if this assumption is violated. Okay. Now there are approaches such as multivariate statistical tools, PCA, which you have studied. PCR and PLS is something that I will introduce in this module and the next. These have proven to be expedient in resolving problems arising from collinearities. If my X is collinear and I still want to generate that linear regression or estimate my coefficients, then PCA, PCR, and PLS are found to be very useful. What do these multivariate statistical tools? Primarily, this MVS stands for multivariate statistics. It's based on one key algorithm, which is singular value decomposition. Okay, and so it seeks to generate a lower dimension space as linear transformations of the original variables. So if I have x1, x2, x3, then it will, as you know from PCA, it will essentially generate a linear combination of those and define. And then it will deal with the lower dimension space. The methodologies assume that the noise is identically and independently distributed, which is not strictly correct. And so if there are collinearities and the like, we need to make sure how we deal with them when we are doing this kind of an analysis. Okay. So what we will do is now the first of the algorithms, building on what Professor Mani taught, is augmented principal components. What does this do? As the name suggests, it essentially looks at an augmented matrix, not just of X, but X and Y. Okay. And what it does is it basically looks at now if Y and X are linearly correlated, this Z matrix is collinear in some sense because at least Y is related to X, so at least there is one collinearity resulting from that. If there is a collinearity further in the X block, it helps you to deal with that as well. And what APC does, augmented principal components does is it's a two-step method that cleans up the noise or the error in the first step, and using the noise-free X and Y block, it will give you a robust estimation of your parameters. Okay, so this is what we would like to eventually go towards when we are doing machine learning algorithm, because when we are working with noise, bias inevitably creeps in, and you are always concerned about the quality of your estimates because subsequent decisions are based on those estimates. Noise should play a minimal role in your decision making, right? So that's where this becomes extremely important. Okay, I just going forward, I just talked about this example 1 with noise of equal variances, and it shows up as 0.25. Noise of unequal variances, it gets corrupted in that sense. It still shows you a small eigenvalue which is substantially smaller than the other two, but it's not the same. Okay. So, two inferences, PCA removes noise only from the correlated variables, and the noise associated with the independent variables here are retained in the scores. This is a simple simulation that you can also perform and for some interesting results. Okay. Now let's look at an alternate interpretation of the total least squares. Okay. Suppose we say that YA is equal to XA theta is the true relationship between the clean variables YA, which is actual, and XA, which is actual, and EX and EY are the errors in the observations XA and YA. Then, assuming that the errors are additive, that's also a big assumption, but let's assume that the errors are additive. X can be written as XA, which is the clean A, typically unknown, plus EX, and Y is YA times plus EY. Okay. And now when I construct Z, since X is M cross N and I augment Y, Z becomes R M cross N plus 1. Okay. And now this is an augmented matrix with X having full rank, and the only linear dependency is between X and Y when I look at X being of full rank. Okay. Now let's see how to deal with this problem. Z is, remember, XY. So now what do? I subject Z to an eigenvalue, eigenvector decomposition, or a PCA. When I do that, if I expand it fully, this is the first score, this is the second score, this is the n plus 1 score, and I have corresponding loadings associated with that. I hope this is not the term scores and loadings you're already familiar with from Professor Mani's lecture. So if this is how I would expand Z actual, okay, now what I would do is I would essentially see this is Z is equal to Z actual because X and Y are both assumed to be clean. Okay. So Z is equal to Z actual. So when I subtract it PCA, now what is Z? Z is XA, YA. So if I open that up, it becomes X transpose X, X transpose Y, Y transpose X, Y transpose Y. Pn plus 1 is equal to lambda n plus 1 Pn plus 1. This is the last eigenvector. Okay. And now what I just do is I modify this equation. I modify this equation introducing to a matrix J, which I am assuming to be null or a matrix of appropriate dimensions 0. Okay. And I bring this to the left hand side. Okay. So minus lambda n plus 1 I is Pn plus 1 into Pn plus 1 is equal to 0. Okay. This correction matrix actually is not needed when X and Y are both are clean. That is when I am dealing with XA, YA. So this J is null. And so now the last eigenvector, Pn plus 1, since XA and Y are linearly dependent, you can say that the last eigenvalue is equal to 0. right? We saw that earlier. It will either contain noise or it will be 0 for the clean case. So this is 0. And because this is 0, I can say that this entire thing is equal to 0, which when I rearrange becomes like this. Okay. If I now rearrange this further, because Pn plus 1 can be, this n plus 1 vector can be written as in terms of its individual vector P1 n plus 1 up to Pn n plus 1. If I now do this and I open it up, it becomes this. And so the ordinary linear problem is when I move all of this to the right hand side, I essentially get the first n elements of the eigenvector divided by the last element of that eigenvector is the actual solution of the problem. Because on the right hand side it is x transpose x A inverse x transpose y, which is what you will recognize as the ordinary least squares problem. Okay. Theoretically, what I'm able to show you is that for the clean case, if I look at the eigenvector corresponding to the smallest eigenvalue, in this case it is 0, I look at that eigenvector, I scale the first n elements by the n plus 1th element, take a negative of that, then that is my solution vector, because theoretically that can be shown to be equal to x transpose x inverse x transpose y. Okay, so for the theoretical case, I know that now this works. All that I have to do is take Z as an augmented X and Y matrix and subject it to a PCA. Look at the last eigenvector. Take that eigenvector, scale the first n elements by the n plus 1th element. Negative of that is my solution vector, which describes the theta vector, which is the relationship between y and x under the clean case. Okay. Now what I do is I start modifying my problem. I say that the causal block is still clean, but the output is corrupted. Okay. Now I get the same expression, but now what I choose J, instead of in the earlier case, I chose J to be the null because I did not, it was clean. I didn't want noise, I didn't have noise. But building from our example, the two examples that we saw, we know that the smallest eigenvalue is basically noise. And so what I do is for this case 2, I choose J to be diagonal of the first elements, n elements to be 0, and the last element to be the variance associated with this noise. And I subtract it from this. Okay, remember, just note what I have done here. Here I have said XA transpose XA, which is the clean X. XA transpose Y, I'm not using YA here, I'm using Y because it's the noisy Y. Likewise here it is the noisy Y. And I'm subtracting now from the diagonal sigma YE, which is the noise variance. Okay. When I do this, I can still look at the smallest eigenvalue. It won't be 0, but now the eigenvector corresponding to that smallest eigenvalue will still give me the least square solution. But it's now an estimate because there is noise associated with this. Okay, it's an estimate now. Okay. Now let's go further. The causal block X and the output Y both are corrupted with noise. So X is X actual plus EX, Y is Y true plus EY. And now what I do is I have to choose J now to be the diagonals of each of these. Where sigma X1 is the noise variance associated with X1, noise variance associated with variable X2, and so on, and then sigma YE. If I J to be that, and I look at the smallest eigenvector, I can get the parameter vector. If I assume the noise variance is to be the same, then I get the formal least square solution. Okay, this is something that you can derive from yourself by doing matrix analysis, but I hope you can follow the derivation here. Otherwise, the slides are available to you. So what we have done so far, we have sought to build upon our earlier module where we said solution is theta is equal to x transpose x inverse x transpose y. We have sought to build upon this by looking at generalizing that, starting with the clean x, clean y, clean x, noisy y, and noisy x, noisy y, with the noise variances being the same. Turns out that it is the TLS algorithm. Okay, So TLS parameters need to be determined from the eigenvector of the last or the smallest eigenvalue. The TLS parameters are unbiased only when the variances of the noise are the same in all variables. Okay. Now, if the causal block X is collinear, then determining the smallest eigenvalue is not so easy. Okay, because there will be many eigenvalues that are small or zero. Okay, and so we need to go beyond TLS. And that's where we start motivating principal components regression and projection to latent structures, because these are algorithms that can accommodate collinearities in the X block. Okay, but they still assume that the noise variances are the same. Can we now work with differing noise variances as well? That's what we want to look at in this module. So let me just pause here, because I introduced too many concepts in this time, and let me just pause for some questions. Any questions up to this point, please? Is it too mathematical what I'm talking, or is it, are you able to follow? Any one of you can respond, please. Anyone other than Om Prakash and Abhilash, of course. Yes, Vinod Kumar, please. Please, you can speak, Vinod Kumar. You have to unmute yourself to speak. Should I unmute you? Maybe. Vinod Kumar, we are not able to hear you, but you did raise a hand. So do you have a question? Maybe you want to put it in the chat box if you can. If connectivity is a problem. Okay, anybody else has a problem? Well, Vinod Kumar chats. Anybody else has a problem, has a question?
Sir, I have a query.
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Is the denoising and filtering are the same, like in the filters we use like what do you say?
Correct. Well, your question is correct. Your question is very relevant.
So both are the things are same, sir?
I'll explain how they mean the same. Okay, they are not the same, but they mean the same. Let me explain to you from this context. One is I have a signal, and over that I have a noise. Okay, so that gives me a noisy signal. Now, what filtering does is filtering seeks to eliminate the noise and retain the signal. And in that process, what it could do, depending on the nature of the filter, is it can actually also take away some of the signal information. Okay. If the filter that you have used is very light, then the noise will be retained in your measurements. If the filtering is very heavy, then the signal is lost in what you filter out. Okay. But when you are talking of denoising, we are talking of denoising in terms of these variances, which is related. What is variance? The overall variance of the signal can be decomposed. Overall variance of the measurement sequence or the time series can be broken down into variance of the signal and variance of the noise. Now, if I assume that these are additive in nature, then denoising and filtering become the same. But if they are not additive, there will be some removal of the noise, but you can't say that they are the same. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
If it's not additive, then yeah, you need to look at that notion of filtering in a slightly different context.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sometimes the presence of a filter, especially in the nonlinear case, see, in the linear case, there is this very nice result which you can show that if the system is linear, be it static or dynamic, if I have a particular frequency in my input, the output also has the same frequency and nothing more. But if the element is non-linear, be it static or non-dynamic, then if my input has a certain frequency, the output can have many more different frequencies. Okay. And therefore, when there is a nonlinearity involved, when the noise and the signal are not additive in nature in terms of the overall time series, then the notion of filtering and denoising does take a little bit of does require a different interpretation. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions, please? Okay. So let me continue. I hope you can see my this thing. So now what we will do is we'll very quickly introduce the approaches that will help us when my X block is also collinear, when the noise variances are different and the like. Okay. So let's consider this now, that I have X is XA plus EX, Y is YA plus EY. And now the true relationship though is YA is equal to XA theta. Okay. And now what I want to do is I want to bring in this aspect of errors in variables. Okay. So the first thing is, let's assume that the actual XA matrix is rank deficient. The true X is rank deficient, meaning that it is collinear. A case in point is, if I am trying to estimate in a chemical engineering problem, if I am trying to estimate composition in a distillation column, the top composition from temperature measurements. So my composition is my Y variable, my temperatures are my X variables, and they are collinear in nature because, as you go along the distillation column towards the top, you will find that when the temperature changes, they all change in a collinear manner. So there is a rank deficiency when I just accumulate all the temperature measurements into a matrix. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to deal with that XA. So let's assume that we are trying to look at estimating the relationship between Y and X when XA is rank deficient. That's where this algorithm called principal components regression becomes important. Okay. I could very simply state principal components regression by this formula over here. Okay. Now that does not help you much, but as a quick takeaway from this slide, you can just use that. When I'm trying to estimate a relationship between Y and X, where X is collinear, I can use principal components regression. What does principal components regression do? Principal components regression does a PCA on the X block, which can be written like this. Okay, I pick up the first T scores because those are all linearly independent. And what I do is I express X in terms of the scores. So when I do this, X transpose X, theta is X transpose Y. I write X transpose X in terms of TB transpose. When I do that here, and I simplify it, it becomes my estimate theta is P, which is my loadings, T transpose T from the first R values times T transpose into Y. So this, since all the T's are linearly independent, I can say that this is relatively better condition than using X here, X transpose X. So that becomes a much better condition problem, and I get a robust estimate of my theta. Okay, so very simply, if my X is collinear, I can use PCR, principal components regression, to perform my regression problem. But we need to, as engineers, go much beyond that and try to understand what are the bias implications, what are the noise implications, what does noise do to the estimate of theta. Okay, so if I look at XA can be decomposed in this value, in this manner. And so what I can do is, under the assumption that the noise is uncorrelated, what I can show is that I can, so just ignore all of this math, but what we can show is that the estimate theta can be related to the the noise variance of sigma square. What we get is a relationship that the estimates of the PCR are biased when the causal variables are noisy, which is not a very surprising assumption. This is what we also saw in the earlier module. The principal components of the causal block retain noise associated with the original variables, although the discounted components filter out noise from the highly correlated measurements. And the PCR estimates converge to the true values only when the measurements in the causal block are noise free. Okay, so typically when I have to do this analysis, I can say that PCR converges to the true values when I have a clean X. And so, the question that Swapna Reddy asked about filtering, if I somehow I'm able to do the filtering, the linear case of the X block, then I can get an estimate that is close to the true value. Okay, that's something I can do. But in general, what happens is PCR by itself is not a very good algorithm when I look at an error analysis, because the noise is retained in the original variables, although it's discounted in the correlated variables. Okay. Similar analysis on the for the PLS, but I have not introduced PLS to you, so we will not look at that. And so there are two aspects to this. There is an augmented principal component and there is a generalized augmented principal component, which probably I will suppress for the time being. But what I will do is I will share the slides to you. I will just quickly talk about some of the aspects that you need to know. Okay, what are the aspects that you need to know? Now what we are doing is we are looking at a Z in which both the X and Y are noisy. And what we want to be able to do is look at this aspect of how do you still perform principal components analysis for parameter estimation in the simple case and in the generalized case. So what is the simple case? Okay, the simple case is when I look at TLS and I choose the eigenvector corresponding to the smallest eigenvalue, which we have already seen. Okay, now for the rank deficient X's, there can be several small eigenvalues, and so an error in variables formulation needs to be done. Okay, this is that error in variables based formulation, and when I do this, I can show that if I look at the errors in variables formulation and solve this optimization problem to determine the smallest the eigenvector corresponding to the smallest eigenvalue, I can solve this as a what is called as a simple augmented principal components analysis, where I have this new variable zeta transpose zeta times L, which is the eigenvector, is equal to CL. This is an eigenvalue eigenvector decomposition. And by looking at this matrix zeta, what is this zeta? This zeta is T, the scores augmented with Y. And when I do this and I look at the smallest eigenvalue, I can get the theta. Okay, that is a simplified or the simple augmented principal components. And in terms of the algorithm, basically it's very easy to construct. Basically, all that I need to do is look at the first R components of the X, augmented it with Y, get the new matrix zeta, and then I perform eigenvalue eigenvector decomposition and look at the first R scores and build my theta. Okay, so this is exactly what is said in this algorithm for SAPC. So I will not go into that. But what happens when I have unequal error variances in X? Now this simplified augmented principal components assumes that the noise variances are all the same. If the noise variances are different, then I could use something called as a GAPC, okay, generalized augmented principal components, which is basically a problem of trying to estimate those noise variances in such a way that once I am able to do that, I can augment in that J. Going back, if you remember, I had presented to you this matrix J. Right, this J is a correction matrix to this covariance matrix. This is a correction matrix. So if I am able to estimate this J as a diagonal of the noise variances in each of the X's and in Y, how do I do that? By estimating it. And that's what is done in generalized augmented principal components. What we do is unequal error variances. I do some analysis based on what's called as the Frisch scheme. Again, in the interest of time, I will not go into too much of details of this. Basically, in this Frisch scheme, what we do is we try to estimate those in an iterative manner. Okay, so that a covariance matrix becomes singular. Okay, I keep doing this in an iterative manner till all the variables in Z are computed. And once I do this, what I'm able to show, and I'm just going fast forward here, is I am now estimating a clean Z, which is Z hat. Okay, this Z hat is something that I estimate here. If you see here, this is the clean Z hat. If you remember what is Z, Z is basically the X matrix augmented with a Y matrix. I can look at Z hat, which is basically the clean X and the clean Y. And from that, I can do a regression and go ahead with the regression problem to estimate the parameters. Okay, so this is something that I wanted to tell you in terms of how we do the error analysis and how do we extend what we know in terms of the ordinary least squares and the total least squares. Total least squares assumes that the noise variances are all equal, and so you can use a singular value decomposition or eigenvector decomposition, subtract the noise variances from X transpose X or Z transpose Z, and from that you are able to get the parameter vector. But when the TLS fails because the error variances are not the same in all the X and the Y, then we have to look at some advanced methods of basically filtering out or removing out the noise from the X and the Y. And when we do that, we essentially get a clean Z, and from that clean Z, you can estimate your model parameters. Okay, so this is essentially some quick validation results. If you want to see, this is a numerical example. Okay, let's just spend some time on this because this is something that you can relate to when you're looking at the slides. So let's assume in this simple numerical example that my theta vector is something like this. Okay, XA. Let's assume that XA consists of 4 variables, with the second variable being related to the third and the fourth variables. Okay? So this XA is basically collinear. Okay, if you try to build your theta vector using ordinary least squares when your X is collinear, then X transpose X inverse will be ill-conditioned and you'll not get a robust estimate of your theta. Okay, but now in the case when it is collinear, let's assume that we have EY, EX, assume that we have noise variances of 0.1. Now we use PCR, we use PLS, we use TLS, and we use SAPC. This is the simplified augmented principal components. Now you see that the SAPC gives you the true parameter matrix. 2, 2, 1, 1, -2, -1, -0.5, and -0.5. Whereas each of the algorithms, PCR, PLS I have not yet introduced to you, but PLS, total least squares, all of this give you biased estimates. In fact, PLS gives you A1, B1, A2, B2, A3, B3, where this relationship is surprisingly true. Okay, and SAPC, the proposed algorithm, gives you consistent estimates irrespective of how much noise you have added. And if it is 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, SAPC will still give you consistent estimates. The only assumption here is that the noise variances are the same in all the variables. Okay, if the noise variables are different, then SAPC also fails. Okay, so what we have done is we have assumed the same case with the same collinearity, but we have assumed that the noise variances are sigma, sigma by 2, sigma by 3, sigma by 4, sigma by 5, and sigma by 6. Now you see that all of these algorithms, PCR, PLS, TLS, SAPC, all of these give you biased estimates, but generalized augmented principal components is able to reliably still estimate your parameter vector, which is this one, okay, no matter what the noise variances are. Okay, so in general, when I have a bad X meaning collinearity, noise variances are different and the like, there is a very reliable algorithm called generalized augmented principal components, which actually can give you very good estimates, robust estimates closer to the true values. Okay, now one has to go ahead and actually also do some kind of error analysis with respect to this, but that's something that is part of research for those of you who are interested to go further in this matter. Okay, just by the way, I just want to acknowledge my student here, Vijay Sai, who did some of this work basically in analyzing noise effects, collinearity effects when we are doing ordinary least squares. Okay. So again, I'll pause here to take questions and then go into projection to latent structures. Questions up to this point, please. So what did we see in the before the earlier pause in the lecture? Before the earlier pause in the lecture, what we saw was that SVD or PCA has some denoising properties. The extent of denoising we saw is dependent on how much independence is there in the X block and or the Y block. And we saw that if the error variances are all equal and I do a PCA, then the smallest eigenvalue turns out to be the noise variance. So I'm actually estimating the noise variance. Now, if I estimate the noise variance, I can build a very reliable regression by doing Z transpose Z, which I show if I subtract from Z transpose Z a diagonal matrix consisting of zeros, except the last element being sigma square, then I'm able to denoise that entire thing. And then I can use it for my parameter estimation. In the case when I have collinear X and I have all the noise variances to be equal, what we saw was simplified or simple augmented principal components works very well. But if I have collinear X and my noise variances are all not the same, then I can use generalized augmented principal components. Okay, and all of this, is very, very important and very, very useful when I'm trying to perform several tasks like, very simply when I'm doing, let's say, a linear regression, when I'm trying to build, let's say, soft sensors, when I'm trying to identify models under closed loop, when I'm trying to do, higher order regression, when I'm linear in parameters kind of regression, all of this this is very useful for all of those cases. Okay. So let's pause here. Questions, very quick questions. There is one chat message. Okay, from Ravindra Desai. He says, "Good going, please continue." Oh, that's an old one. Any other comments, please? Any other questions, please? Just feel free to ask if you have any other questions. Okay. If there are no further questions, then let me continue with the next algorithm, which is PLS. Okay. Now, yeah. So skip this in the interest of time. Yeah. Let me look at now the PLS algorithm. Okay. The PLS algorithm is something that is used when not only my X block is collinear and noisy, but my Y block is also collinear and noisy. Now you may be surprised as to why is the Y block collinear. Why typically so far we have assumed to consist of only one variable, whereas here Y turns out to be collinear means it has more than one variable. Turns out that yes, indeed, when I'm trying to identify a relationship between several Y's and the X's, then it becomes a PLS, a projection to latent structures problem, because my X is collinear, it has several predictor variables. My Y is collinear, but it's a matrix of predicted variables. And typical examples are product quality and the like. And I want to build a regression model between them. So now how do I go ahead and build that regression model? Okay. So that is where this algorithm called PLS, or projection to latent structures, becomes important. What principal projection to latent structures does is the following. Okay. So long what we have done, we have looked at X block as a predictor, Y block as a predictor. Okay. And what we have done at best is we have combined them into a single Z, but under the presumption that the Z basically has, in case X is full rank and Y is a column vector, then Z becomes an n plus 1 dimension in terms of the number of columns. But in practice, we may have several extensions to that. So if now I have a collinear X, there is a correlations in the X block, and of course there is a variation in Y. Okay. Of course, Y block can also contain correlated variables, and I'll show you a plant example subsequently where this is true. Y can also contain correlated variables. So the columns of Y, especially if it is quality variables, they can also be collinear. Now, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to exploit the correlation in X, right? So you must effectively capture the correlation in X and be able to explain as much variation as possible in Y. Okay, so that's the idea. The idea is now I have two blocks, Y and X, and I want to be able to capture as much information as there in X to explain the variation in Y. Okay, and so what you want to be able to do is construct what's called as a covariance function. Okay, so what we do here, we say that let's look at defining this as an optimization problem. I don't know if Professor Mani talked of PCA also as an optimization problem. Om Prakash, can you please help me here? Did Professor Mani deal with PCA as an optimization problem?
No, sir.
Okay. Then let me just treat this as an optimization problem. Okay. So let me just back up a little bit. So now we have X, we have Y. So let me first talk only about X. Okay. What does PCA do? PCA says, let me construct the first principal component as a linear combination of X, the columns of X. So for example, here, if I take T1 as X times P1, okay, so J1, let's assume that I'm doing principal components analysis and this is P1. So T1 is X times P1. I construct a second score T2 as X times P2, T3 as X times P3. If I had to solve principal components analysis as an optimization problem, then what I do is I bring in a sense of canonical structure to this. What do I say? I say that the first principal component needs to capture maximum variance. Suppose it as an optimization problem that says maximize T1 transpose T1. Okay. In a similar manner, what I do here in PLS is I construct the first score, if you will, as a linear combination of the X block. I hope all of you are here with me on this. I take columns of X, X1, X2, X3, X4 up to Xn. I multiply it by a vector J1, which is essentially the linear combination. So alpha 1 times X1 plus alpha 2 times X2 plus alpha 3 times X3 up to alpha n times Xn. The alphas will become the columns of this J1. Okay. I still don't know what they are, but let's assume that I'm able to do this. So T1, the first linear combination is constructed in this manner, X times J1. Likewise, remember, Y contains more than one column. So I can do a linear combination of all the columns of Y also. And the first of these linear combinations is Y times alpha. Okay, everybody is with me on this here. So basically, this is the first linear combination of the columns of X. This is the first linear combination of the columns of Y. Now I still have to determine this J1 and L1. How do I determine them? I determine them by solving an optimization problem that says that I want to maximize a covariance measure of the X and Y space. So what I do is I say T1 transpose U1. When I say T1 transpose U1 and I seek to maximize that, T1 transpose becomes J1 transpose X transpose, U1 becomes Y L1. Okay. So this is what I want to maximize. Okay. Now, what I want to do is, in addition, when I want to maximize this optimization problem, I want to impose certain constraints. What are those constraints? Those constraints are that the first linear combination must be orthonormal. So J1 transpose J1 is equal to 1 and J1 transpose all other J's, J2, J3, J4, J5 are all zeros. Likewise, L1 transpose L1 is also equal to 1. I pose this because, when I do this in this manner, I can make sure that the first linear combination of X and Y essentially is aligned with this objective. What is that objective? Correlation in X must be effectively captured and variation in Y must be effectively explained. So if I do that, solve this optimization problem, I will be able to obtain T1 and U1. Okay. So this solution is actually an eigenvalue eigenvector problem which we can theoretically show, and this eigenvalue eigenvector problem can be solved to determine J1s and L1s, likewise J2s and L2s and J3s and N3s. Okay. So this is what is done in the PLS, and then what we do. So here is what we do. We say that Y and X are the inputs to the PLS modeling. Okay. We treat Y in this manner, we treat X in this manner, and what we do is we generate estimates of U1 and T1. This is the outer model corresponding to the first dimension. Okay. Now this U1 and T1, what I do is I regress them, because what is my ultimate objective? My ultimate objective is to build a relationship between Y and X, and Y and X are collinear. But the U1s and T1s are orthonormal. So I mean, I can build a very reliable regression between U1 and T1. But remember, it's only a partial relationship. Why is it a partial relationship? Because I'm just using one linear combination. I can use a second linear combination, third linear combination, till I effectively use all the variation of X to explain all the variation in Y. And so if I do this, I can show you this by this block diagram. The first dimension, essentially, I build an inner model and get U1 transpose. I multiply it by what are called the weights Q1. So what does this do? This F1 is the unexplained variation in Y. Unexplained, why? Because what is explained is all of this, right? This U1 essentially builds that inner relationship, and that is explained. What is not explained is F1. The original variation minus what has been explained by the first dimension is what is the unexplained variation. We do a similar thing for Y, for X rather. For X also, whatever has been exploited to explain Y is taken out by this subtraction from the original X, and the residual essentially goes. So F1 and E1, if you will, are the residual amounts of variation in Y and X that go to build the second dimension of PLS and the third dimension of PLS. And I can keep doing that over and over again till I essentially exploit all the correlation of in X to explain all the variation in Y. Okay. So in that sense, it's still basically systematically deflating the information in X and Y, deflating the information in X to explain the variation in Y. You are essentially like a balloon deflating X, the information in X, deflating the information in, or explaining the variation in Y till such an extent that I have nothing left in X to explain except noise, and I have nothing left to exploit in the way in the correlation in X, and nothing left to explain in Y except the noise. Okay. This is under the assumption, of course, that the relationship between Y and X is linear. If it is not linear, obviously, this inner relationship that I told, this inner model can actually well be a neural network. It could be a polynomial regression. It need not be a linear regression. It can be a polynomial regression. It could be a neural network and the like. So PLS is also used in conjunction with a neural network, in which case it's called as an NNPLS, a neural network-based PLS. Or it can also be called as poly-PLS, a polynomial-based PLS. And in MATLAB, there are several demos that can show you how, excuse me. Madhu, I'm in an online course, so can I call you in a while? Is there something very quick that you want from me? I have a break in about 20 minutes, so I will call you back. Yeah, okay, thank you. So, what this helps you to do is basically look at the, where I was. I was basically when Y is also collinear, X is also collinear, Y is equal to X theta. When I try to do that, it's not robust. So what I do is I try to extract the independent components through U1 and T1 in Y and X respectively, build an inner relationship in the first linear combination. What is left, I try to build in the second linear combination. And I keep on doing this in such a way that I effectively deflate the correlation in X, that is explanatory of the correlation in Y. But as I said, if the relationship is not linear, then I can build this inner relationship using neural networks, polynomial PLS, and a whole bunch of other algorithms that could be extensions for the nonlinear case. Okay, so again, now progressively building towards the use of these advanced tools. What we saw was that when I have a noisy Y and a correlated Y, a noisy X and a correlated X, how I can still obtain a reliable regression model between Y and X. The next step is PLS. Okay, so I introduced PLS to you before I introduced the removal of the noise. But again here, the projection to latent structures is still not a very complete algorithm in that sense. It is critically dependent on the assumption that Y is linearly dependent on X. It also does not handle noise as effectively. I'm repeatedly coming to this point of noise because noise is something that can confound your estimates and can give you completely incorrect predictions, especially when you're going to make decisions based on these estimates. You have to be very careful. Over and above that, in tasks such as fault detection and diagnosis, in tasks such as when you are trying to look at the blowing up of the matrix when there is collinearity and the like, you want to be extra careful about how do you deal with noise. Okay? You want to be as close to the true values as possible. Nowadays, there are technologies that talk about the digital twin. When you're talking of digital twin, your model must agree with the plant as closely as possible in the absence of noise as well. That's something that, in the presence of noise as well, and that's something where noise considerations become very important. So what I'll do is I will just quickly show you what is the PLS procedure, basically the X block loadings, Y block loadings, the W, the weights, and the X block scores and the Y block scores. B is the inner relationship. And so we can use this to basically explain Y in terms of the X's, but actually the scores of X's. Okay, and generally the inner relationship, as I said, could be a nonlinear model as well. Okay, so now let me pause for questions, but I would, in the remaining time, 15 minutes, I would like to show you a very important example where Y and X's, the collinearity and the correlation can essentially be exploited. But before that, let me pause for some questions. Please, questions. See, without questions, it becomes a monologue. Please ask. Participants, please ask questions. It makes me uncomfortable that either everything is understood or nothing is understood. I certainly don't want the latter. So, even if it is a very elementary question which you feel uncomfortable about, doesn't matter. Please ask. Don't feel uncomfortable, because I know that it's hard to understand this in the first pass. So I certainly recognize that. So just ask whatever questions come to your mind. Nobody? Okay. There are no questions. Let me go to some very quick case studies. Yeah. Okay. So this is one example. I alluded to this in the this thing, inferential sensing. So here, this is an example of PLS as applied to estimation of a distillation tower top composition. And this is something that was done way back at Mitsubishi, Japan. And here is the problem. Okay, all of you can recognize, those of you who are not from chemical engineering domain, you can at least recognize your 12th standard chemistry experiments. Distillation, what happens in distillation is that I have a feed, which is a mixture, and I separate the feed based on its relative volatility. I get the lighter component on the top and the heavier component on the bottom. I have several trays or beds for contacting the vapor and liquid, and eventually what comes out as vapors from the top is condensed. It's analyzed, and if it is not on spec, then I increase the reflux. Those of you who are non-chemical, you might remember that reflux is basically a stream that comes back in your from your condenser back to your still, so that you are able to distill and get pure distillate, the lighter component here, and the pure bottoms composition here in a binary distillation column. Okay. Now, for those of you who can understand this, great. What the problem was is the following: that this is a high purity distillation column. What do I mean by high purity distillation column is that this distillate purity has to be of the order of 99.999%. Okay, the 3 nines as they call it. Okay, given that there is a feedback control, and that feedback control essentially is dependent on either the top temperature or a gas chromatograph, which give measurements once every 90 minutes. Okay, Nirmala Devi had a question. Okay, I'll come back to that. I saw the question, R square adjusted. Okay, I'll come back to that question in a minute. So let me complete this case study and then I'll quickly answer your question. Or time overflows, then I'll bring it up in the next session. But I'm continuing. So, here the problem is that we have a reflux stream that controls the top composition, but for feedback control, this measurement needs to be more frequent. However, it's measured only once every 90 minutes, so it's practically useless for control, from a process control perspective. So what they wanted was a reliable estimate of this top composition based on what can be measured frequently in this column. Okay, so large sampling intervals and time delays associated with this online analyzer, which is this one. Okay, pressure swing due to ambient temperature change. When there is ambient temperature change, the pressure in this swings, and so it becomes a problem to estimate. The top composition varies, and it's difficult to keep track of that. So a reliable top composition estimator was needed. They already had some estimator, but what happens here is that there are collinear variables. I explained to you the X matrix consisting of collinear or dependent columns. Here the X matrix is temperature measurements along all these trays or in the packed bed, and that those measurements are typically correlated. And so getting that estimate not so straightforward. Further, some variables can contain more noise than signals. Now, again, a problem of noise handling, which if not done correct, can actually just throw everything away, all the good work that you have done away. So you have to be very careful about this now. Okay? So these were the difficulties. Now here are the X and Y variables for this problem. Here X variables are 26. What are those X variables? You can see top section temperature, enrichment temperature, mid-section temperature. A lot of these are temperatures which are all correlated. Okay, and there is one variable Y, which is the top composition. Okay, this guy has to be estimated in a very, very reliable manner for feedback control. Okay, so given this, there is a dead time associated with the analyzer. Dead time estimation was tried, but eventually gave up. So basically what happened was, because there was collinearity, because there was noise, PLS was used or attempted to solve this problem so with significant PLS dimensions being 2. We remember going back here, the PLS dimensions are the ones that first linear combination, second linear combination and the like. it turned out that only 2 were required to solve the problem. That indicates that, out of the 26 variables, the linear combinations of those 26 variables, only 2 of them are really important. The other linear combinations are practically not important. Okay. Then we went about doing noise estimation of the variables. And it turned out, this is the estimated noise variance versus the variance of X. And as you can recall, if this is closer to 1, then you have a problem. Okay, so as you go up, it becomes noisier. There are a lot of variables that were quite noisy, especially the flow measurements were very noisy. Temperature measurements relatively had less noise associated with them. And other thing is, I didn't talk about this, but the PLS is sensitive to scaling. So, the PLS estimates tend to be biased towards the large magnitude variables. And so you really need to be the noisy data should be weighed less in the overall predictions. We tried some scaling methods to remove noise and the like, but basically, the scaling method, the noise typically influences the PLS model coefficient. You can see that the circles are the unit scaling, whether the pluses are the other scaling. Unit scaling gave much reduced noise variances than the other scaling. But anyway, it was not so significant. Okay? The key point here is now this, that when we throw in when we assume an X and you build a Y, are you sure that you have chosen the right X's? What are the important variables in X? What are the key variables? How do you choose those key variables? Okay, so it turns out that it might be entirely possible that some of the X variables have nothing to do with Y, but because you're unsure, you just throw it in there. Okay. Likewise, some of the if you're looking at Y, only a small fraction of X can be actually useful in predicting Y, then what do you do, and so on. So that's something that comes under how do you select the most influential variables, the important variables, and the like. Okay. So what you want to be able to do is exclude the variables, that might, excluding the X variables that may not affect the predictability of the model. And also you want to keep the models small so that they are easily maintainable. So given this, the PLS fortunately also does something called a loadings or the weight analysis, as you can see here. Okay. If you remember in Professor Mani's lecture, he talked about scores and loads. Scores are basically the linear combinations. Loads are basically the coefficients associated with the linear combinations. Here, the weights, the vectors are basically the importance of the variables. And if, remember that there are only, what we mentioned earlier was that only two, where was that? We said only 2 dimensions were enough. So when we did this analysis of the first and the second and looked at the plot of the loads, it turns out that a good number of them had or projected to 0 along both the first and the second, the primary and the secondary, just projected closer to 0, whereas a good number of them were larger than 0. So all of this that projected close to 0 were essentially deleted from the variable set, and that eliminated the variables from 26 to 10. Okay. Now amongst these 10, we use this approach called stepwise regression. What is stepwise regression? You start with what you believe as the best set of variables and keep on adding one variable at a time and see whether the prediction error is improved. The stepwise regression was applied to test all the combinations of the remaining 10 variables. One of the variables, of course, T2, was always kept in the model because as per the first principles knowledge, this was most significantly influencing the top composition. Okay. And based on this stepwise regression, 4 variables were the final choices: T2, T3, F6, and P2 in the X block. And then a PLS was done of that. Turned out that the model that they used earlier was this, which contained T1, top temperature and enrichment temperature, and F6 is the reflux rate. Whereas the PLS model gave one additional variable, which is the bottom pressure as well, as an important variable that actually influences the distillate composition. Okay. So it's possible, as an extension of the PCA PLS, it's very important to understand that when you look at the loadings or the inner the weights, it turns out that the loadings can actually give you important information about each of the variables set X and Y, whether you have by mistake included an X variable which is not necessary. Okay, it might help you to just retain the most influential variables. Okay? Now, what I'll show you next is basically the modeling results. The original model that they had gave predictions like this, where the continuous lines, the blue lines are the model output. In some cases, it actually under predicted, but in some cases, so these are the experimental values from the plant and the PLS model predictions. You can see that especially in this region it still performs not so good, but here and here the PLS model performed much better. And the true test, of course, was when it was deployed in the actual plant. And here is the control results where the PLS model gave measurements or sensor information every minute. Earlier, with the old method of doing things, the variances was very large. The impurity limit is 1000 ppm. It occasionally violated the 1000 ppm limit, but for a significant amount of time, it was much away from the 1000 ppm limit. Whereas when PLS was implemented, turned out that it went very close to the 1000 ppm. Now, why is this important? This is important because remember I told you that this is a high purity distillation column. And whenever you are doing a high purity distillation column, the energy required for this high purity is very high and it increases as I go to higher and higher purities. So as I go to higher and higher purities, which means the impurity levels go up to 500 and the like, this is a really high purity, much higher than what is actually required to be delivered. Okay, the energy expended here is huge. Okay, whereas if I'm able to push the operation closer to 1000 ppm, which is the actual spec, then I save enormous amounts of energy. Okay, and so the plant actually reported that by implementing this PLS-based soft sensing and closed loop control, they were able to approach as close to the impurity limit as possible, and this gave them substantial energy savings, which is something, a nice result coming out from the implementation of this PLS model. Okay. So I'll just skip this in the interest of time, and I'll stop here because it's 6:30, which is the time for this module, and I will stop the recording, but I'll continue to take questions. Okay. Stop sharing. Meeting. Stop recording.